Have you ever heard of a military operation so powerful, so relentless, that it literally drowned an entire army? Not with water, but with trucks, gasoline, and bullets. In the summer of 1944, after the D-Day landings, the German High Command was actually feeling pretty confident. They looked at their maps, consulted their centuries-old military rulebooks, and concluded that the Allied invasion would soon grind to a halt. German generals like Alfred Jodl and Gerd von Rundstedt were certain of it. They predicted that after advancing about 400 miles from the Normandy beaches, the American army would hit its culminating point. Its supply lines, stretched thin, would collapse. Their logic was based on European warfare standards, the slow, methodical pace of horse-drawn carts, and the rigid constraints of railway logistics. They expected the Americans to pause, regroup, and give the Wehrmacht precious time to form a new defensive line. They were disastrously wrong. The Americans weren't playing by European rules. They were about to unleash a weapon the Germans had never conceived of, the Red Ball Express. What followed was one of the most incredible logistical feats in the history of warfare. A non-stop 24/7 river of steel and supplies that shattered every German assumption and powered the Allied blitzkrieg across France. This is the story of how trucks, not tanks, won the war. Immediately after the breakout from Normandy, the Allied advance, spearheaded by General George S. Patton's Third Army, was moving at a breathtaking speed. But this success created a massive problem. The front line was outrunning its supplies. The French railway system had been systematically destroyed, ironically, by Allied bombers to prevent German reinforcements. The ports were in ruins. Without a constant flow of fuel, ammunition, and food, the entire offensive would stall. The solution, conceived in desperation and executed with astonishing speed, was the Red Ball Express. The name came from a railroad term for priority cargo. On August 25, 1944, the order was given. The U.S. Army commandeered a massive circular loop of highways stretching from the beaches of Normandy and the recently captured port of Cherbourg, all the way to the front lines near Paris and beyond. One set of roads was for outgoing trucks only, the other for returning empties. This was a one-way non-stop superhighway dedicated to a single purpose: feeding the war machine. The scale was mind-boggling. The Red Ball Express was given absolute priority over all other traffic. Military police lined the routes, waving the marked trucks through every intersection. No stopping was allowed, except for 5-minute breaks every hour. The goal was to deliver a minimum of 12,500 tons of supplies to the front lines every single day. To do this, the Army mobilized an average of nearly 6,000 trucks, crewed by 23,000 soldiers, running day and night in all weather conditions. It was a conveyor belt to hell for the German Army. The philosophy behind the Red Ball Express was uniquely American and utterly alien to the German military mindset. The Germans valued precision, efficiency, and conservation of resources. The Americans, backed by the industrial might of the home front, embraced a different creed. Volume beats efficiency. Waste is acceptable overhead. Think about it. In a traditional army, if a truck engine failed, it would be carefully taken to a workshop, disassembled, repaired, and put back into service. The Red Ball Express had no time for that. If a truck broke down, mechanics would try a quick roadside fix. If that didn't work, they'd push it into a ditch, grab the driver, and put him in the next available truck. The broken vehicle would be cannibalized for parts or simply abandoned. At its peak, the system was so punishing on the vehicles that nearly 30% of the trucks were deadlined for repairs on any given day. Over the course of its 82-day operation, the Red Ball Express effectively burned through over 5,000 vehicles. To the Germans, this would have been unthinkable, catastrophic waste. To the Americans, it was just the cost of doing business. They weren't just sending trucks. They were sending entire replacement engines. Why spend days repairing an engine when you could swap it out in a few hours? This industrial, almost disposable, approach to warfare meant that while the Germans meticulously rationed every bullet and every gallon of fuel, the Americans could afford to be prodigal. This wasn't just a logistical plan. It was the application of Henry Ford's assembly line to the battlefield. The impact of this relentless flow of material was immediate and devastating for the Germans. Their entire defensive strategy was based on the assumption that Patton's tanks would eventually run out of gas. They planned for an enemy that could advance, at most, 30 miles a day. Instead, fueled by the Red Ball, Patton's armored columns were roaring across France at speeds of 40, 50, even 60 miles per day. They didn't just break through German lines, they vaporized them, encircling entire divisions before they even knew what was happening. German commanders were left in a state of shock. Their plans became obsolete the moment they were written. How could you establish a defensive front when the enemy was already 50 miles behind you, setting up their artillery? The speed was simply incomprehensible. And behind this incredible achievement was a group of soldiers whose story is one of the most compelling of the entire war. In the segregated U.S. Army of 1944, most African-American soldiers were relegated to service and support roles far from the front lines. The Army Transportation Corps was one such unit. When the call went out for drivers for the Red Ball Express, it was these men who answered. Approximately 75% of the 23,000 drivers who formed the backbone of this operation were African American. For 82 straight days, they drove through rain and mud, on roads pocked with shell craters, often under the threat of sniper fire or Luftwaffe attacks. They drove while exhausted, grabbing sleep whenever and wherever they could. They learned to fix their own trucks, to navigate by instinct, and to push themselves and their vehicles to the absolute limit. They were the lifeblood of the Allied advance. Their success was a powerful, undeniable refutation of the racist Nazi ideology the Allies were fighting against. But it also sent a profound message back home. The skill, courage, and sheer determination of the Red Ball drivers proved their indispensable value and became a major catalyst for President Truman's decision to desegregate the U.S. military a few years after the war. These men weren't just delivering supplies, they were driving change. One of the secrets to the Red Ball's success was its culture of improvisation and decentralized command. While the German army was famously rigid, with generals requiring permission from the highest levels for even minor decisions, the Red Ball Express thrived on the initiative of junior officers and sergeants on the ground. If a bridge was out, they didn't wait for an engineering battalion and weeks of planning. A young lieutenant would gather his men, scrounge for timber and steel, and get a temporary bridge built in 14 hours. If a convoy got lost, a sergeant would figure out a new route on the fly. This get-it-done attitude, empowering those closest to the problem to solve it, was a massive advantage. It made the entire system flexible, resilient, and incredibly fast. This logistical dominance created a stark contrast on the battlefield. American artillery commanders were given unheard of freedom. Need to soften up a target? Fire at will? In one 24-hour period, a single U.S. artillery corps fired over 100,000 shells, a number that a German division might not see in a month. While German panzer units were sometimes rationed to just a few gallons of fuel per day, American tanks were kept topped up. And the Red Ball wasn't the only system. It was supplemented by a massive airlift operation, and most ingeniously, Operation Pluto pipelines under the ocean, which pumped fuel directly from Britain to France through undersea pipelines. The Germans weren't just outgunned. They were overwhelmed by an all-encompassing Allied abundance that crushed their ability to fight, and more importantly, their will to resist. The Red Ball Express became a weapon of psychological warfare. For the German soldiers huddled in their foxholes, the sound was inescapable, the constant, grinding 24-hour-day roar of thousands of truck engines. It was the sound of an infinite enemy, a relentless industrial monster that never slept. It became a symbol of their own impending doom. Later in the war, the Allies would even use this to their advantage, broadcasting recordings of truck engines over loudspeakers to simulate ghost convoys and trick the Germans into thinking a major attack was coming from a different direction. After the war, captured German leaders were almost unanimous in their assessment. When asked why they lost, they didn't just point to battles like Stalingrad or Normandy. They pointed to logistics. Field Marshal Walter Model, one of Hitler's most capable commanders, stated it bluntly: "We were defeated by American trucks." Heinz Guderian, the father of the Blitzkrieg, described the Red Ball Express as a flowing river of material that drowned our forces. They were beaten not just by soldiers, but by an assembly line that stretched from the factories of Detroit to the front lines of Germany. The Red Ball Express officially ran for 82 days, from August 25th to November 16th, 1944, when the port of Antwerp was finally opened and rail lines were repaired, providing a more stable supply chain. The operation cost an estimated $100 million. But by fueling the rapid advance that destroyed the German army in France, It is credited with shortening the war by as much as 180 days, saving countless lives and billions of dollars. Its legacy extends far beyond the battlefields of Europe. Many of the veterans of the Red Ball Express, having mastered the art of keeping the trucks rolling 24 hours a day, returned home and applied those principles to civilian life. They founded some of America's first major long-haul trucking companies, helping to shape the modern logistics and highway industry that powers our country today. So the next time you see a convoy of semi-trucks rolling down the interstate, remember the Red Ball Express. Remember the thousands of drivers, mostly forgotten by history, who raced through the night to feed the guns of Patton's army. They proved that, in modern war, courage and strategy are vital, but victory ultimately belongs to the side that can deliver. Thanks for watching.